big thanks to all our sponsors: Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3, email inquiries at skipsandbins.com, website skipsandbins.com, easy contract, free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks again to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. If you'd like to order some, then give them a call on 01768 210 102. Go to the website mrvickys.co.uk or drop them an email, info@mrvickys.co.uk. A big thanks to United Group Travel. They're a family firm based in Morpeth with pickups throughout the northeast. No strangers on our tours, just people you haven't met yet. They've got a presence on Facebook and a website, unitedgrouptravel.com. If you want to make a booking, give them a call on 01670 632 460 or mobiles 0791 666 4174 0795 71 41654. Thanks to Darren Baldwin Funerals, independent funeral directors. Let us look after you in your time of need. They're based on Old Durham Road in Gateshead, and you can contact them at their website, darrenbaldwinfunerals.co.uk. Email darren@darrenbaldwinfunerals.co.uk or give them a call, 0191 478 2730. A big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things. And a big thanks to New Workwear. You can find them at newworkwear.com. If you want to help the channel, hit the thumb up to subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and share to your other social media. You can also pay a one-off fee of £25 to get a scarf, a cup, a pen, and a membership card. Go to the website, nufcmatters.com, and click membership, or put your smartphone over this QR code. We also support the food bank on this channel. If you want to make some donations virtually, go to nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk and make a donation today. We're also a podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and other podcast providers. Just search NUFC Matters. I'm also a part of the Northeast Footy Brekkie Show. You can listen to that Monday to Friday, 7 till 9 at the tooneuk.com. We've also got an event coming up next year. It's in January the 19th at the Tyneside Irish Centre. It's an evening with Nobby Solano. Tickets are available on voucher for £20. Don't forget, Supermac and Gibbo do every pre-match at Louis Liquor Store. It's free entry, children welcome, and there is great food by Fed's Fried Chicken. They're usually on pre-match and sometimes post-match at Louis Liquor Store.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email john@nufcmatters.com to arrange today.
Attack. It feels like I've been talking to myself again, but it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you.
Good morning, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It is Eddie Howe's press conference review for the game against Luton Town, which takes place today. A good old-fashioned 3 o'clock kickoff in the Premier League. And it'll be an emotional day, of course, at Luton Town with Tom Lockyer having a cardiac arrest last week. The fans going to pay tribute to him, I believe, in the 4th minute. So safe travels to all of our Newcastle fans, and let's hope they play their part in quite an emotional occasion, but let's hope, most importantly, to bring back 3 points. Okay, those of you who are regular viewers of the channel will know the Eddie Howe press conference review is me giving you an insight into what has gone on at the press conference, and it was probably one of the most interesting ones for me, this, because we saw a little bit more about Eddie Howe and his character and how he deals with pressure, and learned a little thing from Lee Marshall today, as you'll find out. But Reza from BBC Radio Newcastle was up first. He asked for an injury update on Kraft and Gordon. First of all, both victims of bad challenges against Chelsea. He said that Kraft and Gordon, well, he said he would see how they were. He says Anthony's was horrible. He said, and he was very sore, disappointed with the tackle, and that, you know, he was hoping that, you know, it was going to heal and that he wouldn't be as bad as first thought after the game. He says, as for Emil Kraft, he said, well, he had a nasty cut on his shin, it was quite deep, and it needed stitches after the game. Again, they were going to assess how he was before the game today. Reza then asked about Joe Linton and Fabian Schär and the scans that they were both going to be having. He said, yeah, look, the scans painted a similar picture to what we thought. He said, nothing too serious. He says, perhaps Joe Linton is a little bit more of a concern than Fabian Schär. He says, but all in all, there will be decisions made about them before the game on Saturday. He then asked about Isak. He simply said 50-50 at this moment. Then mentioned that a lot of people had called BBC Radio Newcastle over the course of the week and talked about Lewis Hall. A lot of people scratching their heads about Lewis Hall not playing any part at all in recent games, despite being a substitute. Is there an issue? You know, you mentioned that things had taken a bit longer with him, perhaps. He went, no, he's settled in fine. He's working well, but we do need to develop his game in certain areas. There's no doubt of his qualities, and he's been brought in with a view to the short term and the long term. He says, but we need to be patient with Lewis, is what Eddie said yesterday. He then asked him about the deal. You know, is it still the case that this is an initial loan which is going to become permanent? Eddie just said it was a difficult, a complicated transfer structure, and he hasn't hit various targets at the moment, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to. And it's going to be a big season still for Lewis Hall ahead. Reza then moved on to Lockyer at Luton. Just asked Eddie for his opinions about that. He said, yeah, look, I watched it. He says it was very difficult to watch a player go through that. He says, and of course, for the second time, but our thoughts are with his family. His health is paramount, and everybody at Newcastle United sends the best wishes to him and his family. Rita then asked him about Luton. Bog standard question, this from the press. What do you think about Luton's form? It's a tough place to go, etc., etc. And he went, yes, very difficult. He says, I've been as a player many times. He says, I am looking forward to it. He says, but when you look at their results, probably don't give the full picture. He said, you know, they took Manchester City and Arsenal very close. They got a draw versus Liverpool. He says they competed well physically. He says they're a well drilled and well committed, you know, a very committed team. And he says, you know, we need to be at our best to be able to win this particular game. Reza then asked him if they would be training Christmas Day off, they'll be having a day off. He went, no, they will be in for a short period of time. Keith was next from Sky Sports. He said, this is going to be an emotionally charged atmosphere at Luton. Will that add to the difficulty? Eddie paused and then said, yeah, possibly. It's difficult to know what the atmosphere will be like for this kind of situation. He says, but we, you know, don't get sucked in that. We just got to focus on our own game. Decisions about players. You've mentioned that you've got injuries. Keith said, you know, is it going to go down to the wire with the players that you've mentioned? He says, yeah. He says, I think it's going to be one of those days. He says, of course, with injuries, players do feel different after games. He said, but ultimately, it will come down to the wire. Trippier, he moved on to Kieran Trippier, obviously gave away the goal that led to the equaliser and missed a penalty against Chelsea, which saw us dumped out of the Carabao Cup. Has he shown strength? And is he okay? Eddie just said, yeah, he's fine. He's vastly experienced. He says, but it's not about him. It's about the collective. We were so close to progressing against Chelsea in the Carabao Cup, but that's the way things happen sometimes. But collectively, that is the way I look at it, not individuals. Keith pushed with this. He just said, look, Kieran's usually, he's 33. He's usually the player that people turn to for experience, and he puts an arm around people. Has it been very much a case of the players doing it for him this week? Again, Eddie didn't want to go down that particular road. He just said, look, he's a leader, he's a role model. It's no different to any other week for him. He's been in these positions before. Collectively, we've been in these positions before, and we need a response against Luton. He says we drew the game. He says I'm not making that out as an excuse. He says, and I know we went out of the cup. He says, but he says I can't ask the players to give any more. He says they've given everything, and from Eddie's perspective, I got the impression very proud of his players. It was very similar to the PSG exit. The PSG draw, we exited the Champions League, Newcastle come back in the win. He said that's what he's looking for against Luton. Keith then asked him about what you call him, Sven Botman. He said he's good. After that 45 minutes, we will, assess him, of course. But I'm really pleased with his return. He looked strong and he looked comfortable. Keith then asked him what his thoughts were on the European Super League. He said, it's probably best you don't ask me. He says, I think the biggest thing I can say about that is he says that the supporters of various clubs let their feelings know about the Super League previously, and it's their call. Andy was next, Andy Sixsmith. Basically just asked about the support to Trippier. And he said, look, he's 33. Have you given him much support? Again, he just answered the same question again. And it's not just about one player; it's a collective. Our response, has been to put our arms around the team, not just one individual. And he says, previously when we've gone out of a cup competition, our response was the Fulham game. It was excellent. And he says, you put that as a point behind you. But yeah, look, he says, from our perspective, it's a collective, and we're a very close squad. Andy then reeled off the fixtures that we've had. Obviously the AC Milans of this world, Dortmund, PSG, Manchester United, Manchester City. All of the games that we've had in close succession. Then Chelsea, of course, away in the Carabao Cup. What has that done for the team, and what has that done for the character, the shape, and the growth of your team? He said, well, look, our pre-season was like that. He says, and it can only help you improve. He says, when you play these teams, you get closer to them. He says, obviously for us, injuries and the squad numbers have been difficult to deal with. He says, but when you play big teams and better teams, you get closer to them. So certainly something that Eddie is enjoys, and we'll certainly be looking forward to January, as he's mentioned before. Andy then asked him about Bruno. He says he's looking imperious in recent games, and Eddie agreed. He said, look, he's been on top of his game, and he's had to be. Andy then asked him if he was almost like a father figure to Lewis Miley, and Eddie said no. He said I don't think he would see himself as a father figure. He said, but he's certainly been leading by example. And he said Bruno's a talisman to the squad. He's charismatic, and you can see the lift it gives to players when he plays. So yeah, he's a top player. Andy then moved on to Luton, just saying, it's a unique ground, it's a unique club. What's it like to play there? You've played there as a player. He says, yeah. He says it is. He says I enjoyed it. He says, I've had some decent results there. He says it's in the middle of a housing estate. He says mentally you've got to be right. He says, but it's like that for all grounds. Eddie had pinged a quote out, 100%. He put a quote out a couple of weeks ago, which Andy really liked. And he said, what's your quote that sums up 2023? And he said, I would need a little bit longer to answer that question. He says, I do like your quote. He says, they inspire me. He says, but he says, look, he says, 2023, I really enjoyed all the experiences. He says, we're going to soak up any negativity, and he says we'll use that to fire us into the new year. Andrew from the BBC was next. He said, is Calvin Phillips on your list for a late Christmas present? He says, I never talk about players. He says, but we will look at the gaps in the squad and see what the transfer window brings us, but there are no early plans. Andrew then moved on to the late goals that we've conceded in recent games. What's your take on that? Why does it happen? Eddie said, I don't think there's one thing. Whenever you have something like this, we analyze it. He says, usually it's not one factor. He says, sometimes these things just happen. He says, I thought we were particularly strong against Chelsea. He says, defensively, we were strong. And from our position, he says, we were just unlucky, is more or less, the way that he described it. Andy then asked him about Rob Edwards. He said, Forest Green to Premier League. It's a fairy tale story. What's your thoughts on that as Rob as a manager? He said, well, look, I see many good leadership traits. The way he handled last week, he says, epitomizes the job that he's done there. He handled it very, very well. But yeah, he's done a great job, and he's a great manager. He then asked him about Callum Wilson hitting the 100 appearances mark and 46 goals, of course, and he just waxed lyrical about him. He just said, yeah, look, he's come back from injury. He's done well. His fitness levels are high. He looks strong, and he leads the line well, and he's scoring goals, which is what you want. I didn't catch the name of this next reporter. He was basically asking about the other media up and down the country. He says, do you think they have a misconception of the time frame for Newcastle United's current ambitions? And he said, look, I don't know what the opinion is outside of Newcastle. He says, internally, there's an ambition, there's a target. He says, we want to see growth. And longer term, there are more tangible targets, that we need to hit. He says, but I don't really pay much attention to what people outside of Newcastle say or think. And, he said, we started from a low base, and there needs to be a realization of that. He said, but, we are happy with our progress. Would it be fair to say then, that last season you overachieved? In far as the Premier League's concerned, qualifying for Champions League, getting to the Carabao Cup final. Some of he's answered before this, but he said, yeah, look, he said, for me, that's a difficult question. He says, because my job is to push the players. He says, but I don't want to overcook it. He said, it's a difficult balance. I want them to express themselves whilst still building towards our aims, Chris was next. Away form, again, was his question. He says, obviously, you need to improve that. You changed things slightly at Chelsea. Was that deliberate? He said, we always tweak in game performance. He says, depending on the game opponent. He says, and this was another example of that. He said, we've got a tight schedule. And he says, we play a different way in different games. He said, the Chelsea game, we were close to winning. PSG, we were close to winning. He said, it's, fundamentally, I don't think our away form is a problem. Just look at the games, that we've done well in: PSG, Man United, Chelsea away. He says, but I accept, the league can give a different slant on that. So, from our perspective, we will continue to work in the way that we are, and, the results will take care of themselves. Do you think that having a settled back five last year made a difference, and that's the reason that you find yourself, maybe not performing as well on the road? Eddie didn't agree with that. He said it hasn't hampered us too much. He says because the players that have come in know their jobs and they've done well. He says, but obviously, sometimes playing with a different player can hamper you, but you've got to adapt to it. So yeah, it was he kind of agreed but disagreed at the same time. He's then asked about the squad depth. You said at the start of the season you were happy with the squad depth, but obviously you've had an injury crisis. Do you still believe that you've got depth in the squad? He said, yeah, look, he says, we've shown we've got good depth. He says, we've had games where we've had 11 and 12 players injured. That's the biggest test you can get, yet we've still remained competitive. So, the big problem is we haven't been able to rest players who've been fatigued. So that's obviously going to have an effect on your game and your results. So, yeah, I still believe the squad has good depth, and it's been proven. Jordan next basically just said, the Champions League exit, the Carabao exit, does that show that there's fine margins in these games? And he says a lot of it is how close you can, well, a lot of it can show how close you can get and how cruel football can be. He said there's no hiding place, but he says we've still got to get on with it. He says we've got to look at the positives. We're still in a very good position in the Premier League. It would be easy to slide into negativity. He says the next group of games are really important for us. We've got 2 games against teams, lower in the table, and then we've got a big January. So, we've got to get some good results. But yeah, he's not negative. You can tell he's moved on already. Are the late goals down to the injuries? Asked Jordan. He says possibly, but I don't want to use that as an excuse. But yes, possibly. Another Dominic asked about Ashworth and him being linked with Manchester United. I just really wanted to know: have you spoken to him? Have you got like close contact with him? And is there somewhere which, from your perspective, you've been able to say, are you going to stay? Are you going to go? Essentially, he said that I speak to Dan on a regular basis, but I've not spoken to him about this. I've got no doubt that he's here for the long term, is what he said. How important is he to Newcastle United? Whenever someone's in that role, then he's an important part of the club. He's connected with everything. He's connected with the playing squad. He's connected with the training ground. But whenever I speak to him, he's a very, very calming influence, is what Eddie said. He was then asked by the same Dominic, could you envisage 14, 15 years ago when Bournemouth and Luton were at the lower ends of football, that you would be in this position? And he went, we both got points deductions. We were both in the same position. He says Luton exited the league. He says, but it's an amazing feat for both clubs, Luton and Bournemouth, to be in the Premier League. I never thought I would see that day. And they both deserve, great credit for how they got to that position. Lee Ryder was next. He was asking about the penalty takers. Did the players volunteer, or did you have a list? He said it was elements of both. We had our list, and obviously the players have to want to take them. So, but the top 5 were the top 5, and that was that. So he didn't quite go as far as asking about Kieran Trippier, which I thought he was going to, but he decided to move on to would a goalkeeper be a priority in the transfer window? He says, I know you won't mention names. He says, but obviously, Ramsdale has been linked with Newcastle. He just said, I'll never comment on the players that we're looking at. Lee then moved on. Luton and Forest are your next games. Is this an opportunity to get control of things? Lee said. He said, well, it's an opportunity, but the next game is always an opportunity to get back to winning ways. He says, but we don't underestimate, any of these opposition, so we don't underestimate Luton or Forest. Dominic, number 3, asked him about Isak. He says, has there been a setback? He went, was reluctant to give a yes or no. He just said, look, he's feeling something in his groin. It's tiredness in the muscle. He then asked about the lack of senior options up front. Would it be a risk to put him sub tomorrow, or today, should I say? And he says, I'll leave that to the medical team. And then Ian Murder was next up from the Daily Star. Well, he freelances now. Are you reassessing your transfer plans now that you're out of 2 cup competitions? He said, look, we're trying to make the best decision for us. There's lots to consider. We need to discuss things with the medical team, because obviously there'll be players coming back. I need to get an idea of when players are going to be back. So, we don't want to go and sign a player and then, have a player back in that position. So, yeah, makes sense. It really does. Does the success of the fringe players coming in, those who've come in, increase the need to get some players out of the door? Your squad might be changing, etc. And he went, not in a position at the moment to want any players moving on. He left it at that. Martin Hardy then mentioned the decisions that were being on the wrong end of, the likes of the Arsenal game, the PSG game, the Chelsea game, and he just said, look, commendable for you on the way that you respond to these kind of things, but do you think it counts against you? Lee Marshall then chipped in, and this is the bit I was talking about at the start. He just said, look, Eddie can't talk about match officials. He could be in breach, going into a Premier League game. So that question was withdrawn. He then asked him, have you put your arm around Kieran, which, we've already heard from Eddie about Kieran Trippier. It's collective, it's not one person. So he just said, I'm reluctant to talk about individuals. It's around the whole squad. The arms around the whole squad after that game. Nobody wanted to lose that game, and everyone's disappointed. So then Martin moved on to Kieran playing so many games. He's played lots of games, not had a rest for a couple of years due to international football as well. Eddie agreed with him. He said, look, I've always said internationals have always got the harder end of the scale because of their schedule, physically and mentally. He says, I'd like to see them given maybe a longer window to switch off. Others are able to do that and rest, whereas people who play international football aren't. Oscar was next. He wanted to talk about Jamal Lascelles. He went another good game. Well, Jamal, how impressed are you with the way he's performed? Under your management, under your coaching? He just waxed lyrical about him. Said he's done really well. He's come on in lots of ways. Aerially, he's one of the strongest in the squad. He's got a good understanding of what we want him to do defensively. He's starting to pass and play the ball better. So from his perspective, it was all positive about Jamal Lascelles. Do you want him to stay? His contract could be coming to an end. I said Oscar, and he said, I'm not sure where his contract's at, but he's very much part of our future. He then asked him about the Super League. He just said, I'm against it. And then Kieran was next in. He just said, look, Kieran Trippier, is he okay? Eddie looked at him and said, he's fine. And what's the key in this transfer window, said Kieran. He said, look, the January window is difficult. I feel like a broken record. He says, last January, we managed to get Anthony Gordon. He said, there's not many of those deals around. That was a great deal for us. But overall, it's a difficult window, and we find it, it is difficult to get players in. So we will assess things as and when. Simon was last, and he just basically, asked him about the challenges on Gordon Craft, and he said, is there any anger about those types of challenges from you? And Eddie just played it down. This was the last question. He just said, look, I never know. We never know if they're intentional or, whether they're accidental. Just disappointed in those particular injuries that have been sustained. And that was it. Good press conference, over 32 minutes long yesterday. Some good answers as well. And we will find out obviously a little bit more about the team news just before kickoff at 2:00. If you're going to Luton here, or if you're in Luton now wondering where to go, here is Paul and his review of the bars around the ground.
Hello people, Paul here with another away day guide. This one is for Luton. Anybody travelling to Kenilworth Road, everything you need is coming up. Okay, so Luton, it's just off the M1, about 10 miles north of London. You'll be coming off at junction 10 if you are travelling from the south, junction 11 from the north. The airport is maybe 3 or 4 miles from the ground. It's a cheap taxi, there's plenty of hotels around there if you're staying over. Luton train station is a 20-minute walk from the ground. So in terms of transport, it's all really good. If you're driving in, there's street parking, but it's probably better to try and find a car park in the town centre. There's plenty of them. I've picked out a couple. The Croy Road car park is probably the nearest to the stadium in walking terms, and it's quite handy for the away pubs. Your postcode for that is Lima Uniform 1 Hotel Tango, and your what 3 words for the entrance is Cones Smart Suffice. There's a multi-storey behind the train station. It's got a lot more spaces. It's probably one of the best value car parks in the Premier League that I can think of anyway. That one's about 20-25 minutes walk from the ground and handy for the Bricklayers Arms. Your postcode for that one is Lima Uniform 2 Hotel Romeo, and your what 3 words is Patch Window Scout. The Bricklayers Arms, traditional old pub. You can get out of the back over a footbridge from within the station itself. It's just a dogleg left and then right as you come off that footbridge. It's on your right, maybe about 3 or 4 addresses up the street. Going back the other way or out the front of the station, you've got a Wetherspoons, if that's your thing. It will get busy. It may refuse football colours. They may refuse away fans altogether. The shopping centre postcode is Lima Uniform 1 Sierra Alpha, but that's a big unit and you're probably going to struggle to find it, so your what 3 words is better. Lifts, logs, bills will get you right outside the front of it. Moving up closer to the ground, there is a Conservative club. Probably have to pay a nominal fee to get in, but drinks will be cheap. They're listed as away friendly as well. It's kind of down an alley between 2 shops. There's a sign above it. Postcode is Lima Uniform 8 Hotel Zulu, and your little entrance between the 2 buildings can be found at Admit Flags Ramp as your what 3 words. They always do the what 3 words. Some people like them, some people don't, but these will get you to exactly where you need to be these last two. Save you getting lost and wandering around searching for something and going, it's not even here. It's all well worth giving it a try. Your final one is actually within the terraced houses that the turnstiles are built into. It's called the Bobbers Club, after the nickname the fans gave that stand that the away fans are housed in, because back in the day you could get into that stand for one bob, which is about a quarter of a Freddo nowadays, I think. If it was me, I probably wouldn't head there first, but it's supposed to be away fan friendly. Postcode for that area is Lima Uniform 4 8 Alpha Alpha. And what 3 words for that particular part is ranked rice limbs. And then a little bit back you'll find the away fan entrance. It is gate 7, one turnstile. And yes, you go through the terraced housing, up some stairs, over people's back gardens and into the stand. Really unique, small ground, great atmosphere. What more could you want? Absolutely cracking. Have fun, go mental, but keep it sensible. Give your club a good name. I've been Paul. See you in the next one.
All right, and time for Toon Stato to give us his views on Newcastle's trip to Luton.
Hello there, another emotional week for Newcastle United. We play Luton tomorrow, trying to win only our second away game for the season. So far, only 1 win against Sheffield United, 2 draws against West Ham and Wolverhampton, and 5 defeats, more than the total number of defeats away from home in the last full season. We haven't played Luton for many years. Actually, we have played only once this century, back in 2018 in January in the FA Cup when we won 3-1 at home. When it comes to away games at the Kenilworth Road Stadium, we have 6 consecutive games there without scoring a goal. Actually, the last goal we scored was back in 84-85 season, and we drew 2-2. The last away win there is in the 80-81 season, more than 40 years ago. When it comes to Luton themselves, they have taken the lead against Liverpool, Arsenal and Manchester City lately, although they didn't manage to win any of these games. They have only 1 win at home so far this season, but they have scored in all games but 1, the defeat against Tottenham. Newcastle is doing pretty well against newly promoted sides. No defeat in the last 16 games. The last one to beat us was Leeds back in January 2021. Since then we have won 9 and drawn 7 against the newly promoted sides. The danger man for Luton is Elijah Adebayo, who has 4 goals, and actually he's looking forward to scoring in a 3rd consecutive goal tomorrow. Mick Harford was the last player to do it for Luton back in '92. For Newcastle, Anthony Gordon is something like the main man this season with 6 goals and 4 assists in the league, the most goal involvements of any player, and his best season to date in the league. So, let's see if we manage to break the away voodoo this season. Away the lads.
Great stuff. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Toon Stato. And good morning to everybody in the chat. Good morning, Tom. Good morning, Sam. Good morning, Be Happy. Good morning, Paul. Who else is in there? Blue Rhythm Boy. Trips will be back as strong as ever. Yeah, 100%. I agree. Hi, Ray. He says Newcastle should sign Phillips and Ekatike on loan. Jadon Sancho and Jonathan Davies. Yeah, I tell you what, that would be a great window. I don't think it's going to happen though, but very optimistic. Luton versus Newcastle. Dan Burn, left back. Callum Wilson and Alexander Isak on the bench. It's a win for Newcastle United. I hope you're right, mate, and I hope you have a good Christmas. Les says, listening to Luton fans, they've got a well-run club there after today. Wish them all the best. Les, completely agree. There may well be a fans forum tonight. I'm not 100% sure. A lot depends on what's going on in my life today. Hopefully there will be. If not, the next live show will be the Amigos. But I did want to do this for you today. But don't forget, there is a show set for all the days through Christmas. So, there's always going to be something on the channel up until we come back in the new year as well. So won't let you down. Plenty stuff up there. Some great interviews for you to watch. At least 45 minutes, 50 minutes of NUFC Matters each night over Christmas when you're sitting, eating your chocolate and having a drink in the house. Okay, folks, thanks as always for all your support. And if we're back tonight, we will be. If not, the next live will be the Amigos on Friday. Have a good day. Let's hope for 3 points. Take care.